One thing I would have loved was if we could ever like crash a party for that Celery Night Fever to meet Terry Crews. My goodness. These were my favorite people ever. And the guy's so talented. So,
Yeah.
but it's creepy and weird because he's a married man. Not that I'm interested in that, but I just wanted to like say hi to him, like, hey, we worked on a show together. Like he
On
cares.
VeggieTales.
Welcome back to the What's the Big Idea podcast, the podcast that talks to former employees of Big Idea Productions about their lives before, during, and after VeggieTales. Jody Nilsen has quite the portfolio of illustrations and paintings. However, did you know that she grew up in the Midwest, has some unseen artwork related to Big Idea, and even worked on a show that never came to fruition? All of that and more with the one and only Jody Nilsen.
Thanks so much for joining our podcast.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. I'm delayed on the politeness, I guess.
Who are you?
What exactly do you want to know? Just general?
Just general stuff. Yeah.
Let's see. I'm kind of a Midwestern person. And just growing up, I guess the only thing I really shined at doing, except for kickball, was drawing. And then that led me to go to art school, to a couple of colleges, and then, got random jobs here and there, always contracted. I started out in advertising. So I was in New York City downtown at Young and Rubicam for, I forget how many years. The plan was to kind of stay in New York City and get established as an illustrator, but the city was kind of making me sick. So I ended up in Chicago, which led me to Big Idea. So that's kind of a summation. So I've kind of stayed in the arts. I'm a graphic designer now, but when I go home, I do a lot of freelance work for illustration for just different clients. But yeah, that's kind of the long and the short of it.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty, VeggieTales stuff, what was your childhood like?
It was interesting. The school that I went to, the kids were, I think, training for, I don't know, being the most hateful people ever. So there weren't a whole lot of nice kids that I knew growing up. So our family split up and I ended up going with my mom to Nashville, Tennessee, which that's where I am now. And I started going to high school there. Yeah, just a different crowd altogether, but pretty diverse, and got to know different groups of people pretty well, like the typical 80s, the jocks are one category, the cheerleaders are another. Then you have the shop guys, you have the art crowd, and you have the pep squad people. Then we had the soccer people, we had all these different people. So I just tried to make friends with everybody and joined track my high school, I think junior and senior year. That was fun. I had a bunch of friends from that. And then left immediately 1 week after graduating to spend some time getting to know my dad and his wife and their son, not their son, but he adopted my stepbrother, and then went right from there to college in Detroit and downtown Detroit, which wasn't the greatest area, but it was definitely a change of pace and I didn't hate it. We had a lot of fun. So
All very interesting. But what also interests me as well is that I read somewhere in like a text interview, you were fascinated with art since 2 years old and you have a drawing to prove it. Do you recall the drawing?
yeah, it was on like a thick manila paper, and it was a painting in red paint of a person just kind of standing. My mom actually saved it, so I had no idea I did it until I was probably in my 30s. She told me, she was like, yeah, you did that when you were 2 years old. So I have it hanging on my wall to kind of prove, these are my chops. So
Oh, that just goes to show like how far of a length like what you do influence the rest of your life.
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why whenever I'm around kids, I don't try to talk down to them because their personalities are already in training. So they have enough people patronizing them as it is. But it's amazing to see how kids really are born wanting to do something. And then, throughout their life, it kind of becomes either a possibility or it gets slapped down. Some people kind of push through that anyway. But when I was a youth leader, I did youth leading different groups of kids, except for seventh and eighth grade. I wanted to stay away from the junior high school years. But the high school kids, that's when they're kind of picking who they want to be. And I just remember being really blown away by how they all wanted to do something so different. And I was very impressed by that. It was a pleasure to get to talk to them and talk them through a few things. And, I was always around if they had questions, but I figured this is a really good group of kids from Elmhurst, Illinois, and they did really well. So I just remember when I was leaving, they were like, what are we going to do without you here? And I thought that was very kind of them, but I think they were kind of dealing with missing someone or parting ways before they hit college. And that happens all the time. I just said like, well, I'll move on. You'll have another youth leader and life will just go on. So, they were really sweet. All of them are pretty much doing awesome, really healthy, normal, sweet kids. So I think I lucked out on that group.
Truly amazing, I'll have to say.
Yeah.
Speaking on the topic of kid stuff, what was your favorite like film, show, any special media that you were growing up that you still have it in your mind?
Like overall,
Yeah, overall.
I'd say Jane Eyre, favorite book, and then Masterpiece Theater did a really great adaptation of that. But that's one of my favorite films, just dealing with all the stuff that the character was thrown. I felt like the Masterpiece Theater version really dealt with it pretty well, that she maintained a godliness, which they didn't really delve into too much in the movie. But in the book, she's a Christian. That's one of the first things that really hits home to her is a friend of hers, her only friend at the orphanage, just tells her about Jesus and she moves on from there and it kind of sticks with her. So I just really appreciated the way they did the actual film. And I think other than, the typical entertainment like John Wick and other films like that, those are pretty much my favorites. That and Good Will Hunting. I really enjoyed that film.
That reminds me, I saw the new John Wick 4 movie in
Oh, you
theaters.
did?
Yeah, I did. That was amazing. That was fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, was it really good? Did it hold up to like the whole series, or was it kind of like, all right, they're really beating a dead horse?
I'd say they ended it off pretty well.
They did good. Okay. Does he still have the dog in the film? I haven't seen any trailers at all.
Yeah, the dog's still in the film. I do remember that. Yeah.
Yay! Yeah, after John Wick 3, it was like I really need to get a dog exactly like that. So
You mentioned siblings. So, what were your siblings growing up?
one of them was my older brother from just the family I grew up. He's 2 years older. His name's Mark. And then we were separated when I was around, I think, 11 or 12. Since the family wasn't doing too well, the parents separated and they took one of each of us. So I didn't really know him too well when we were living together. He was in a different social group. So anyway, I didn't really see him too much. I know that sounds weird, but it wasn't really the best relationship. But I think we finally became more brother and sister when I was in Chicago. He eventually moved to Chicago and started work at the Board of Trade. Yeah, it was the Board of Trade. It was the Mercantile, I'm not really sure. He's explained to me a couple of times and my brain somehow does not comprehend, but that's where he met his wife. And then they left Chicago after like a decade or so and they live in Florida right now. But yeah, I have a real brother. And then I met my stepbrother when he was around 9. And then, yeah, my dad remarried when I was 16. So yeah, that's kind of the growing up. I didn't really see siblings too often. So it would only be holidays. And then I basically, as soon as I hit college, I had to figure out like where to go for breaks and vacation. And most of the time I ended up with friends. So the sibling thing, like I'll consider my older brother. We still keep in touch. So
Yeah, I was about to say, considering that you do art for a living, what did they do for a living, if you know?
my brother started in finance. I forget what he did before that, but he's still in finance. So he's a financial advisor and he's kind of got a partner with, they're at a nationwide firm. So he's doing really well. And my stepbrother, I think, ended up in artwork, doing things like that. I actually convinced him to take a job at Cedarville College. And he was saying, well, they want someone with a master's degree. I was like, it's relatively minor. If you approach them and talk to them about the position, they'll probably arrange for getting your master's degree finally. So from what I knew, that's what he did. So we kind of lost contact because my family in general, the step family, they weren't too thrilled with me being an artist. But it wasn't until her son, my stepmother's son, became an artist, then all of a sudden it was acceptable. So that's kind of why we're not super close. So if that explains it without being too detailed.
Yeah, I was about to ask if there were any conflicts regarding what you do since you were like the art person and you know how parents monitor their children nowadays.
Oh, yeah. My stepmother flat out told me that I was going to hell.
Oh,
She was like, you're satanic. I was like, okay,
oh my God.
I disagree. And you get people in your life that will act like, or they'll behave as if they have a straight line to God when they really don't. Nobody was giving her special information. She was just whatever, however she grew up, that's kind of how she reacted. And it was a very, very big switch to when her son started taking an interest. And it really broke my heart too, because he had some of my college work hung up in his room. And I think he was too embarrassed because we didn't really know each other, but we got along really well when we met and we became friends and we were just palling around. And I didn't treat him like a little brother. I just treated him like who he was. So I just found it interesting that only because he became interested, then all of a sudden, let's send him to Europe on an art tour. Let's buy him all of the art supplies. Let's lavish all these gifts on him when it was horrible and wrong and satanic when I decided. So, of course, they conveniently forget all that. So that's why I choose my friends wisely and I spend time only with people that are a little bit more positive, I suppose. So I don't know. I don't know what led them to think that way. But of course, if someone gets married to your biological relative, they're really not going to stand up for you. They're going to kind of side with their new family, whatever. So, I wish them the best. I don't really know them anymore. So maybe they changed their mind. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure they forgot all about it. But as far as I know, Aaron is still painting and doing whatever he does. So good for them. But I think I saw them at a wedding. I haven't seen my stepbrother since. It's probably been like 18 years, but I did see them at a wedding and my dad and my stepmom, and I was just catching up and sat with them for a little bit and just chit chatted. I'm like, all right, cool. I was glad to hear what they were doing and glad to talk to them. And it's why make things uncomfortable for everyone around. There was a ton of family. They were kind of making too much of it. It was, in my opinion, I was like, I don't really know them anymore. So I guess that pours into the being an artist type of thing. So I suppose you can't actually be an artist without a lot of that stuff happening.
I also read in the same interview that everyone in your school kept asking you to, quote your words, make their pictures better so they could get a better grade.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of those pictures?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was mostly grade school. I think I wised up finally after, I think, my sophomore year. And at that point, I think people were starting to think like, okay, well, this better be my work. And I don't want to admit that I need help. But definitely in grade school, that was the only time anyone talked to me was for them to, that's why I was saying, like, they were kind of training for some evil people race that they wanted to continue. At least that's my way of seeing it. But yeah, it was like, and me being a big giant idiot, of course, helped them out. And as soon as we left those doors in that classroom, it was like I didn't exist. So I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, I was kind of a chump. Always just wanted to be nice to people and be kind. And there's no point in being, if you will, a jackass to people or worse. So I always wonder where they are, because I know I did that with homework. So I needed help and I would ask people who I thought were smarter to help me out. And like dummies, they helped me out. So I guess it evens out. I'm definitely not an innocent in that one. So kids do it all the time. Now they're just using they're using AI to write their papers. So yeah.
That also reminds me of like, I had bullies back in grade 3 to like, I don't know, grade 5, grade 4.
Oh, geez.
I always wondered, where are they now?
Yeah. I know. I bet they're not doing great. Or I don't know if you saw, there was video footage of a man that he was speaking on bullying, and turned out one of the people he was speaking to was the one that really almost injured him. And it was pretty interesting. It wasn't like a big own or anything. I got bullied a lot at school. It did often get physical. I got home and I got bullied. I had to take a few punches. So I feel like it's not altogether bad, if you will. Seeing that bullying is like gone away and what's happening in society, it's kind of like bullying's not so bad, maybe not so harsh and don't ruin someone's life, but a little here and there. Like people will say whatever they want to me, and it's kind of like, oh, that's adorable. Are you trying to insult me? Oh, you're almost getting there. Just keep working at it. I find it kind of funny. I'm sorry for anyone that got bullied that's genuinely a nice person. They kind of test the waters with being extra, extra weird. And now they're reacting like, oh, I got to be me. And they never get bullied or else it's considered hate speech or something. You just got to make the best of it. If people aren't accepting you in one level, you got to find a way to make your life worthwhile living, contribute to society, don't be a draw, that kind of thing. That is my TED Talk.
Wow. Speaking of school, though, how was high school like?
It was all right. I think my first year was kind of rough, and there were some kids that were they had like jokes going on about me, and I had no idea what they were doing. But I just remember walking down the hallway and someone was trying to insult me. I was like, aw, I really did have that attitude. It was like, okay, you're getting there. Maybe you'll make a dent, but it's not as harsh as you think. So I actually felt sorry for them. And then there were some other people that hated my guts. And it was funny because I started praying for those kids. And later on, they became friends in high school. And it wasn't like a couple of years later. And people had to grow up a little bit, I guess. But it was like, all right, why didn't I do this sooner? I should have just started praying for people sooner, because I wanted the best for them. And the Bible says to pray for your enemies. So that was like the first year I got introduced to the art teachers. There was one that was more the introductory, and then there was one that was more serious, and he was the commercial arts teacher, and his name is John Ashworth. So unfortunately, he did pass away a couple of years ago, and that was a brutal funeral to go to. He was definitely very well loved. He had gone on to work at MTSU, and he was running the governor's program there. So just a really great, smart, very well knowledgeable. I mean, he'd worked in commercial arts, and he gave his own money, sacrificed his time and hard-earned money and to help us out. And God bless him, because some of the kids in our class were a little difficult to deal with. So we had like blocks of time, like 2 hours or 4 hours. So by the time I was a senior, I think people knew that I could draw, and I did get hired through people to draw girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever. And thank God for that, because I was able to pay for gas and food and all that stuff. So that really helped out. But I'm still friends with some of those people today in a way. You're like slightly better acquaintances, I suppose. But yeah, it was fine. Like I actually got to take a break from life, if you will. Like I worked really hard, but yeah, it was nice to have people that weren't trying to wait till you turn the corner to harangue you the entire day. It was like you could actually breathe and actually grow as a human being. So I appreciated that. And then graduation was a little tough. There were some things going on at home. I didn't even make it to graduation. I had to try to find a ride. So let's just say it was interesting times. I had a car that someone gave to me, and I won't go into the details, but it did die. And then I was driving one of my mom's cars, and that actually just broke down like a week after I graduated, and something else happened where I had to leave the state. So it was interesting times. But yeah, I won some awards in high school. One of my French teachers signed me up for a French scholarship, which is funny because I don't, a few scholarships to certain colleges, and I chose the one that gave me the most money, knowing that things were going to be kind of expensive. So I did end up then it was called Center for Creative Studies in Detroit. Now it's called College of Creative Studies. But I ended up going there. And my dream, though, I did want to go to School of Visual Arts. And we had heard through the grapevine, the art teachers were all talking. And during portfolio reviews and all that, they had heard that School of Visual Arts was going to give a full scholarship to a girl in Tennessee, but it never happened. So I guess maybe I missed it by someone's decision. But yeah, high school was fun. I mean, I joined track because I did want to get a letter at least and kind of be a normal teenager. I'd run on the weekends with the coaches as much as I could. So yeah, I ran a lot in high school, junior and senior year especially, and then tried to keep up with it wherever I went. I probably should have done other cycling or whatever, but I didn't have a bike at the time, I don't think. So yeah, high school was fun. I, had different groups of friends. Mostly we'd eat lunch with all the smart kids. And these are people that would study for their ACTs and SATs and all that. And I didn't have the resources, so I just kind of took it cold and hoped for the best. But yeah, they were super smart. They did really well. I haven't seen them really since because I did leave Tennessee right after high school. It didn't really, it's different times. You don't have a cell phone. You don't have everyone's numbers or email or anything like that. You had to really work to keep friendships up. And I was not good at working at that, let's just say.
Did you do any volunteer jobs in high school?
Yeah, I think I didn't really have time or the resources to volunteer. I tried to make as much money as I possibly could. So I basically had different jobs here and there. Anything to keep busy and maintain a little bit of independence. So yeah, sad to say, not a whole lot of volunteer work, although I did donate stuff, or people would just take it and they would say, can you donate this? And then it wasn't really structured, if you will. So hopefully that answers the question.
That's good enough. But after high school, you went to the School of Visual Arts for BFA illustration.
Yeah, that was more, I transferred in as a junior. The way I got there was I had a mural job. It was painting 10 murals in a private home, and I got paid in cash, and all of that cash went into a bank account, which enabled me to live in New York City. So I transferred in as a junior and took one full year and then spread the rest of the humanities courses that I had to take at night school. So I was already working full time. Like at the end of my junior year, I was working full time at Young and Rubicam. And I think I got that job through my mom because she rolled with a pretty rich and powerful crowd. So the president of that company referred me to that job. That is the only way that I got it, honestly. So I'm very grateful for that.
Speaking of which, according to what I've read, you did some rollerblading in the park with your friends, cycling all over Manhattan and walking around during that time. Do you remember any particular memories about that?
Yeah, the rollerblading was with some people I knew from church, and they were doing tricks. I was just trying to keep my wheels under my feet. That was super fun. Cycling, though, whenever there's a city bus behind you, is never super fun. They don't have a whole lot of patience for that. And the pavement in Manhattan is really good, actually. They do really well when they pour that stuff, but people joke that there's potholes. I think the worst thing is the manhole covers that workers have to access for different repair jobs. They're actually sunken into the pavement like 2 inches. So every time your wheel hits a pothole or manhole cover, it's pretty bad. So that was actually really fun. I miss it. I kind of got a little bit more of that cycling around Chicago. And if you ever go to the Loop and you see people cycling the Loop, you'll know what I'm talking about. But New York City was like, it's a little hilly. And sometimes you would get an avenue and it's one way. But yeah, that was fun. I'm trying to think of what else. Yeah, I had to walk a lot because things were kind of expensive. Living there was expensive. Rent was expensive. So the more that I could save, not loading up a Metro card, because they just started the Metro cards when I was there. So it was either tokens or Metro cards. But if you ride the subway during rush hour, people get a little too molesty. So if I could just walk, and when I lived in Manhattan, I would just walk south and go Parkside. So you weren't dodging traffic all that much. And I could just get to work. And, it was just a lot easier that way because rush hour is terrible, especially on the subway. I don't recommend it to anybody.
After the School of Visual Arts, I don't know if this is before or after your time there, but the College of Creative Studies, what is there to say about that? What do you remember?
Oh, that was before. That was Detroit. That was the first college that I went to. It was fun getting to know people. And I can't even tell you like what we didn't do. You put a bunch of college kids downtown Detroit. There's almost too much to do. So not the greatest neighborhoods. I think my first day there, someone was like, someone found a body near a dumpster. You want to go see it? And I was like, yeah, I'm good. It was brutal. Detroit is Detroit. So almost everybody that I knew had gotten their car stolen or jacked. 2 friends got kidnapped. One got kidnapped multiple times.
Oh my God.
It was bad. Yeah. And then I remember I'd work steady jobs. So I'd work part-time at the library. I worked at the front desk for the dorm. And the dorm, no question, if you did not have your student ID, you were not getting in. I'm working the front desk. These 2 guys that I kind of knew came in and they looked white as a sheet. And they had big laundry bins that you would find in a hotel. They had that just dumped their stuff in. And apparently the story was they had witnessed a shooting and the shooter, he made some sort of gesture at them that he was coming for them. So they were like, that's it, we're leaving. They lived somewhere downtown and they threw everything into laundry bins and then stayed at the dorms. I think there was an empty place, but it was not easy. Like I worked in this place called The Closet too. And it was like you'd get store credit every year, but you had to pay at the end of the year. And they sold food and stuff, and it literally was a closet. So I'd have to haul my work in there and try to get homework done and do whatever I could to pay bills. I even cleaned houses, so I'd wander around Detroit trying to find the house because I didn't really have transportation too often, but it was fun. I had a pretty giant group of friends or, acquaintances, but, you're just trying to get by, I guess. I think I'm still kind of friends with some people from college. A lot of people that I knew have really done very well. I mean, if they're not working in the auto industry, they're doing industrial design, which is amazing. And it requires a lot of intelligence and talent. So those were some good times. And I did have a driver's license, but I had lost my license. I don't know where, but I would drive other people's cars. So if any DPD hear this, I was a licensed driver. But I was not a fan of drinking or drugs. So if anybody wanted to go to an event or a party or whatever, I was the one driving. A lot of times people would drive no matter what. But yeah, it was just kind of a mix. Or, we'd wander from dorm room to dorm room, and inevitably somebody would be watching Evil Dead, which was like, okay, I've seen this 400 times already. Can we please have something else on? Or The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai or whatever. And I got to see a lot of shows while I was there, but we worked a lot. I mean, that school was known. They were proud of giving people nervous breakdowns. And I had a ton of homework and some really tough teachers, but I felt like the tougher that they would be, the better. So it was more like School of Visual Arts. I really made friends with the teachers and tried to maintain friendships like that because they were working in the industry. And I really thought that I was going to be a teacher and just be in Manhattan illustrating and doing whatever I could. It did not turn out that way.
When you were talking about Detroit and all those ongoings, I heard some stuff about Detroit. I didn't know that it was like that crazy. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, there's only a few pockets of people. So we were kind of close to Wayne State University. So everybody knows where Wayne State was. Nobody knew where our college was. We were kind of near the museum. And if we ever were out just locally near Woodward Avenue and it was all downtown, you get hit up for money. We just wanted to tell people like, no, I don't have any change. Like, no, I don't have a quarter. We're poor art students. And some of us would buy people things and then some would really not be grateful. So it was pretty interesting. And then there was tons of people that had rollerblades and they would just tear all over the city because it's pavement, not that much traffic there. We ended up going to Windsor a lot. So I spent a lot of time in Windsor. It was just a nicer area and you could actually walk on the streets without too much hassle, I suppose. But yeah, there was times where maybe I didn't feel like staying where I was and having to walk home. You had to walk through some pretty dicey areas. And one time I wanted to leave a party because I thought it was boring. It just wasn't my thing. So friends of mine gave me a lit cigarette and they were like, well, you're going to have to take a drag on it to keep it lit. I didn't have that far to walk, but I was just aiming for Woodward Avenue. And as long as I crossed that, I could get home to where I live, but I was kind of a far pace away. So I'm walking and this rusty, it sounded terrible too. It was this really smelly, rusted out van with no headlights, was kind of circling the block. And they like dipped into a side street and then they came back out and they're right in front of me. All I did was stare at them and take a drag on the cigarette. And I was like, well, I hope they don't grab me. They probably sized me up and they figured that I wasn't really worth their time. So, but I was ready. I was ready to stab away. If it's going to be there, I could pretty much dash across the road and they wouldn't have a chance, not with that heap. But they eventually did drive towards Woodward Avenue and then they did turn their headlights on. So it was a little interesting. But I did get stolen from. I never got kidnapped, which is good because I didn't look like I had money. I would never advertise by carrying a purse that I had money. So yeah, Detroit was interesting. I did go back and visit when I was driving, but I didn't want to leave my car anywhere because everybody would get it stolen. So wasn't really a fan of that. But people tell me to go back. They're like, oh, it's so cute. You got to see it. And I'm like, I might. I mean, just to kind of take pictures because I didn't have a camera at the time. So
you got through the tough times and then you got through School of Visual Arts and college, and then you end up at Big Idea Productions. How did that come about?
I think I was doing contract work. Yeah, I was working for a company through people that I still kind of know. And I'm using that term loosely. I had been warned by people, I don't know if they were like, you got to get out of that company. I feel like the government's going to come down and shackle the I'm not kidding. This genuinely happened. They were like, you got to quit. I could tell you that story, but it may be a mistake. But I gave my 2 weeks and really felt like I needed to get out of there because the owner of the company had asked me to lie and I refused to do it. And I said, all right, this is my 2 weeks notice. And then I figured anywhere was better than there. That company was getting sued by multiple accounts because they were not paying. So they were taking in money, but they weren't paying out or they weren't doing what they were promising. So I'll just leave it like that. So I was freelancing and it's a hustle. I had a rep for a little while. And the disadvantages of having a rep was you'd have great communication and great everything during the week. And then you got somebody that can deal with marketing and deal with the money side. And then you just do the work. But I would be asked to be doing the work over the weekend. So that started to get a little irritating because we had these younger art directors that were not being truthful and they were trying to get a lot past us. So once we finally regrouped and figured it out, it was like, well, we'll make it up on the next project. So kind of got ripped off a couple of times. But when I could actually convey what was going on, the rep was like, all right, I see what you're saying. He's like, you did do the work and they're lying basically. So we'll make it up on the next project. So he had some stuff for Big Tobacco and he kept trying to convince me to take it. I was like, I don't want any money from Big Tobacco. And he's like, are you sure? It's a lot of money. I'm like, I was going to Moody Bible Church downtown and joined a Bible study. And from there met, I'm blanking on his name, but he was a producer. And this is when Big Idea was still a small group. It was like 40 something people. And I think I was their 44th hire. So I had met him at the Bible study. He was like, oh, you're an illustrator? He's like, oh yeah, I could show the design department, because I think they might need someone like you. And then from there, I got a couple contract jobs from them at first. And then they asked me to come on board. So I started working with Ron Eddy, he was like the head of the department. And I'm still friends with Ron and his wife to this day. So, but yeah, it was like late 90s, I guess. And that was fun. I got to bug Ron. Ron is the most patient person I think I've ever met and definitely worked with. So if I ever had a question about how to get something done using the computer, because we were using Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, and if I ever had a question, I would just tap him on the shoulder. And he was always nice and always patient. There was only like a couple of times where he's like, I really got to get this done. I'm like, I get it. So he was like one of my favorite people, definitely my favorite boss to work with. But that's kind of how that started. And then they just exploded. And that's when we did eventually move to Lombard. So we were downtown for a couple of years and got another floor of the building that we were renting. So we were the fourth and the sixth floor. And then we were kind of outgrowing that. And then that's when Phil and company had bought the Lombard Theater and we're working on that construction wise to find a home for everybody there.
Now, you said you joined the late 90s and it says 1997. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I think I started working in like 96, but I got to go back in my records because it may sound like I'm lying. But I did contract first and then worked there and then did get laid off in '01 when the company it was before they were sold, but I still did contract work for them for a couple of years after that. So it's like I started contract and then worked full time and then became contract immediately after that. So.
Big Idea, VeggieTales. How was your first day like at Big Idea?
Gosh, I don't even remember. Only because I was working on site. I think it was more like, here's a stack of the videos. Why don't you kind of like do the homework and look at all the, because I hadn't really seen them. I had only seen printed material in the local Moody Bible had a bookstore. So I saw it, I would be like, oh, okay, I get it. That's cute. But I didn't really know what it was. So before I would do any contract work, I think the first thing that I worked on was a display header they're considered like POP displays or pointed purchase displays or shelf displays. I think that was one of the first things I worked on. But I had to like get the characters and get their personality and come up with a grouping. And then we'd have to beg one of the animators to render it for us. So, or, pose it, render it and all that.
So you were hired in 1997, and it wouldn't be until 2000 where you worked on the Esther episode. So what did you do between those 3 years?
I would do layout. So when we had anything for print, when we had our own 3D person, he would come to me and say, okay, we're going to do this for a CD cover. Can you come up with an idea? So like the ones that come to mind are like the game, the Don't Sink in and Sink. I came up with that grouping and that idea. And then he would render it up. And then we did a calendar and I came up with a bunch of cute ideas for those. I did the Christmas album where I had them drinking cocoa and wearing dumb sweaters. And I had put hair on them both. I don't remember if it made it, or I don't know if I didn't draw the hair or did, but I have like a stack of sketches that I did for people. I'd also work on line art. I was asked to do like work on the style guides. So I had to come up with all these generic poses of everybody and come up with all the different groupings. I went into the animation department and really had to beg for them to just give me some generic poses. So I had them all thumbnailed out and we did like, I think 15 or 20 of each character and then different groupings and just stuff that we could pull and use for marketing purposes. And then after that, they did in 3D, they did something called Toon Render. And I think we started using, I think, Softimage first, and then they were trying to figure out what software to use from there. But at the time, they could use this filter. It was Toon Render. So we would get the files from that, and then I was in charge of cleaning those up. But it was like years later, and they were like, oh yeah, all these people worked so hard on the style guide, and they completely forgot that me and a couple other people and the animators had done all the characters to begin with. But whatever, it's God knows what I did. So I worked on a lot of anything 2D. If there was ever any image and it had like a weird shadow, I would try to Photoshop those out before it hit print. But it was more like we didn't have a really organized job thing. It was just, we're trying to just do our best. And I think Ron was incredibly organized, and whoever they hired was very organized. And we were just trying to get stuff out the door as fast as we could. I did storyboards. I did 3D corrections for anything modeled. Actually, I did a ton of work, but it was all like part of someone else's job. And before I worked on Esther, I begged them, because I was salary. I wasn't getting paid hourly or anything, but I would stay nights and late nights and try to paint some flats if they needed it. So thank God they threw some work my way. So I remember doing one starry field for Esther. And then I was so tired because I worked all night. The deadline was really rapidly approaching, and I stupidly saved over it with a previous version. I had 2 different windows open, so that was a disaster. And then that hard drive actually died. So none of that work is in existence, which is terrible. They were like, well, we could try to revive the drive, but it'll cost $500. And it's not really guaranteed that we're going to get anything back. I was like, it's all right. We'll be able to figure it out. But yeah, I worked really hard because I think by that time we were in Lombard already. We were in the old Woolworths. So we had an escalator separating the floors that was just turned off. So it was considered an inner stairwell. But yeah, that was a good place. It was a good time.
Speaking of which, of like drawings and all that, you worked on this caricature of Robert Ellis for Dave and the Giant Pickle episode, the 1998 version. So what do you remember about that?
I think in the song it was Sonny Bono, but we couldn't use Sonny Bono. And I think I did a caricature of him because the Bono estate was not happy with our usage. So eventually it ended up being Robert Ellis. I tried to make it as sassy looking as I could using the Sonny Bono pose. And I think that's when Mike and Phil realized, like, oh, okay, well, we've got something here. And Phil came up with the idea of, hey, why don't we have you draw some of the employees instead of doing a photo shoot? We'll just have you draw everybody. So the Robert Ellis slide was put into one of the movies, and I think they used it somewhere else. But yeah, I was more than happy to contribute, just like little things here and there. Like whatever they needed, I was like, yep, I'll get on that. But I was really grateful to Phil because he kind of created that project. And because I think Mike and Ron maybe were talking about, they're like, well, Jody's good at likenesses. We'll just have her do this. So I'm sure someone can correct me, but that's kind of how the newsletter got started, to doing all the detailed work. And I'd try to throw in a coloring page or a crossword or whatever I could contribute. I was happy to do it because I thought the kids will like this. So.
I was about to ask if you were involved with such a big idea, because I noticed a lot of the pictures of James Breckenridge and all those other people.
Yeah, it was Phil needed a kind of like a generic torso portrait, and that one I thought turned out pretty well. It's pretty tough to draw Phil, I found. And then by the time I was doing Mike Naraki's, I had a boss that was saying, like, I don't think he understood how long and labor intensive those things were, but he was like, how fast can you paint? I think he wanted to show off to senior staff and done within like 2 days or something. I'm like, yeah, that's not how this works.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I kind of locked horns with him a bit. That's all I'm going to say. But I'll work with someone, but don't go into an irrational realm, or I'm not going to be able to understand where you're coming from. If you've got other motives and you're not likable, then it's not really going to work. So I felt like that was kind of echoed in the portrait that I did of Mike, because I didn't like the way it turned out. It's no reflection whatsoever on Mike. It was more a reflection on my inability to handle stress, I think. So Mike is one of the nicest people. He's a very great businessman and a funny person and just very talented. So I wanted his to be really good. And unfortunately, it didn't really, in my opinion, I didn't think it was my best. For some reason, it just wasn't landing. So more of the other ones, I felt like I was just kind of given carte blanche to do whatever style I felt like I needed to do and shoot pictures of people and try to get them smiling naturally. And you got to employ a couple of jokes. Mike is super easy to take pictures of because he's just so affable and friendly, and he's got a very genuine personality and a smile. So it was just I just was confused why I blew it on his portrait, but I did caricatures of him to make up for that. So I had kind of a wall going of a lot of other friends that I had at Big Idea. So I became part of the tour when people would stop by, like musicians would stop by. Bill would bring them by my desk. And he's like, and here's a wall of shame, like caricatures of different animators and modelers and production staff. So I was like, hey, anything to kind of create some unity. I was happy.
One of the portraits later got hung downtown in the Chicago PR Forum. So what's the story behind that?
I think that was
James Beckenridge.
Yeah, someone went through my website and they picked a few pieces that they wanted prints of. Well, we want to gussy up the office and kind of have an event where we meet the artists. And that's how that turned out. And I think I tried to give it to the Breckenridge family. I don't remember if I did or not. But yeah, I had a really nice print of it and it was framed and everything. So gosh, I can't even remember if I handed that off because that was the only portrait. I'm like, I really like the way that turned out because it was hand painted, wasn't digital. It actually turned out pretty well. But yeah, it was just through a friend and I can't remember who it was, but it's really sad that I can't remember that. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. But I'll bring up some of your other work though, which is one, it's called the VeggieTales gang on your website, and it's of Bob and Larry like wearing hats and Larry having a mustache. So I remember it says Ron Eddie did the layout and all that. So
Oh yeah.
what can you say about that?
Yeah, that's the one. That was actually a t-shirt. And the way it was produced, it was, I think,
It's in can,
yeah,
right?
I think because I did work in apparel for a while, I think it was a 4-color instead of doing like a big blown out separation. If it's on a white shirt, you can do a 4-color and it creates kind of a lighter print. So that was rolled up and put into the collectible tin. And then they had the illustration on the outside of that. And yeah, that one was really fun. And Ron is so good at doing layout. He's got a real dynamic style. And you could really tell the difference between whenever he would do layout versus when I would do it. I would do very, very almost antiseptic, realistic looking. Like I wanted it to be posed and lit and in my mind. And Ron is a lot more freeform. And I feel like his layout skills are pretty great. Yeah, that one was fun.
Yeah, because I personally say that it's one of the best VeggieTales t-shirts out there. So I applaud you for that one.
Thanks. Yeah, and then Ron was the one that came up with the big head Bob shirt and the big, like the shirt is just green and you got Larry's eyes or the shirt's just red. And I think that was Ron's idea. And that was a really big seller for a long time. So that's when I had done some painted versions of Laura, Junior, Bob, and Larry, and we were going to sell those for apparel. And I remember where it was being pitched to certain companies. And I don't know if anything ever came of it, but Dayspring did buy the art for some cards. And I still have some of the cards from that time. I did a big Larry with a big fiery yellow and red background. I think those are the files that died on that hard drive, unfortunately, but I may have had a few because I know Painter files are a little different. I think you can open them in Photoshop, but a lot of the backgrounds that I did in Painter.
Here are the unused design I was talking about before.
Yeah. The ones with Laura and the girls, there was a small, like a diary and stationery and different little stuff. And I think those were used for those, especially them. Like there was an autograph book and I actually still have my autograph book. I would like throw it on someone's desk, like, here, fill it out. So it's covered with a ton of the animators and directors and producers and all that, just writing like goofy diary entries. That I'm never throwing away. And I probably should lock it up because I don't want any moisture getting to it. But yeah, that little grouping of Laura and her friends waiting to get Larry's autograph. I just came up with like goofy stuff for them to like, let's get that approved and then we'll have it modeled and posed and lit and rendered and that whole thing. Some of those were used, but yeah, you can see on the last page, the upper left, like Larry in a beret and all that. That was like some of the artwork that I would work on. I would just work in Illustrator. A lot of these were just for cards or for coloring pages or anything that they needed to use them. So it's like, I don't think a whole lot of people knew that a lot of the stuff the design department was coming from I would be approached by whoever was doing the 3D, and then I would come up with an idea or come up with a ton of sketches. Because a lot of the times they're like, oh, we want to recognize so and so and for doing all this work. And it's like, yeah, it's a lot of work, but I was involved too. So that's just kind of how it went. I felt like even in meetings, I would say something and I felt like nobody would really hear me. And then someone else would just repeat the same thing that I said. And they're like, oh, what a great idea. And I'm like, I just said that. Like, oh gosh. So I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. It's like, I don't know if it's a scientific thing with me being a female and no one can hear my voice. I really don't know. But it was a little bit frustrating because when it came to doing some stuff for Jonah, I would sit in a bunch of meetings and I did some concept work for that. So I was doing production meetings, but then we were trying to promote it in the design department too. So yeah, that was fun. I really wanted to contribute and I thought that I had a good sense of humor. So when I was on concept for a little while, we kind of like would all as a group with Everett and Danielle and Joseph, we'd come up with a bunch of sketches and ideas, but we would all kind of take from the grab bag, like whoever's it was. So I thought it would be funny if Larry had an eye patch, but he would only wear it flipped up. So someone else got to render that and then they kind of get credit for the idea, but it's no big deal because we all liked each other and we all wanted to work with one another. And you just share ideas, you just come up with stuff and we were doing that as a group. So that's kind of what happens. But I was just very glad. It was like a little pat on the back. I was like, oh, I made it in. They were going to do the Pirates movie. I think that was next. I don't remember if they actually did one or not, but I was trying to do artwork for the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything. And I did see some of those in a lot of the promotional stuff because we didn't really have a whole lot of poses. We didn't have any like beautiful, well done, polished poses, but it's been so long. It's like, I can't remember that much. Sorry.
That's okay. And speaking of Jonah, a VeggieTales movie, you worked on it before it was like Big Idea decided, yeah, we don't have enough people. They just decided to like look for more people for like 2-3 years. So how many people were on that production? And I remember also that the production of that movie was kind of hectic. So were there any memories of that?
I worked on the first part of it. So concept kind of gets it first, and then they start feeding things to modeling and it becomes part of the process. So I don't really know as far as production, but it's tough when I was a part of the design department. It's tough for that to be worked in, if you will. Like it's easier if you have one group of production working on that. And it's only when it comes to elements that they might need to pull into the 3D area, that's when I was involved. So as far as the production part, I really don't know. I just remember people joking around about weird things that would happen when they would watch dailies. So they'd work on a scene and something would just go really strange. And so they would have to figure out what happened within the render. Some really incredibly smart people. So, but yeah, as far as that went, I just remember like getting stuff approved. We'd have a meeting and Phil, who had a lot on his plate, would just say like, oh, well, I like this. And he'd come up with an idea. So if I ever wanted to get something approved, I think I just like walked it over to his office and said, hey, Phil, is this what you were talking about? And then he would put his stamp, like everyone had a stamp, which I actually did the one for Mike and for Ron Smith. And Daniel Lopez did Phil Vischer's approval stamp where it was his face and a thumbs up. And that was pretty much how I cut through the red tape. And I'm sure I didn't make friends doing that because it was initially, well, if you want to request some artwork, you're going to have to go to your traffic coordinator. They're going to have to approach the head of your department. The head of your department is going to go to the head of the studio, and then it's going to trickle back down to the person who's providing that. So I would just pick up the phone and call and ask like, hey, do you have this walking sequence or do you have anything you can give me, like a screenshot or whatever? I just need it for line art or whatever. And that's kind of how I would just grease the wheels a little bit, but I'm not the most professional person. So it's probably not the best way to go. Yeah. And then I think by that time, I don't remember the timeline, but that's probably why I was one of the first people to be laid off, honestly. But that's all right. Can't go back and,
And on the topic of VeggieTales, what do you remember about Esther, the girl who became queen, and singing for the Larry's High Silk Hat Choir and Lyle the Kindly Viking?
Those were fun. It was nice to see Kurt at work and he has choir directing skills and we'd all cram into the recording booth. it was great because I think we were given the parts, we were given all the audio on the parts. So everybody memorized their thing and then do the record. And I don't know if they would double up the voices or whatever they needed to do, but it's fun contributing because that's more of like a cute little wink to everybody at the company. You hope the bosses understand, like, oh, I got to kick out and do this real quick. Hopefully my deadlines will all be met. And then working on Esther, that was fun. That was more when I didn't really know. I knew of the concept department, but I had never really worked with them. So Joseph Coolidge was really great at giving more direction on what he wanted to see. And yeah, it was good. We were just, there's certain specs we got to hit for the painting itself. And I have a Wacom tablet and I still use a Wacom tablet, but I was just painting digitally the whole time. And I was just hoping that it wasn't the wrong look or anything like that. But between the creative department, you figure that stuff out. So I thought it was good. I was happy to take some of the pressure off of some groups because, it's just a mountain of work. And then say somebody, it's not like we had the budget to change our mind like Pixar. Pixar hires a ton of stuff, but they don't use really not much of it. But they just throw a lot of money at research and development. They've got like mountains of artwork, but then they don't end up getting approved or whatever. But I think we were more like grassroots and whatever we needed, we were working on. So it was nice to contribute. I really enjoyed being a part of it.
We interviewed Keith Lengo, and according to him, that Trouble on Planet Wait Your Turn, I believe that's episode 1 of 3-1 Penguins, was a production disaster. Did that ever occur to you while you were working on that?
Nah, I mean, Keith was more of the guy that you had a lot more responsibility. And I was just one of the cogs in the wheel if they needed me. So I don't know if I contributed. Yeah, I think I did contribute on that one. I contributed on one of them. So I was happy to help out. I think I was doing tree flats for, I know one of the 3-2-1 Penguins things. And if he was frustrated, there was a reason because Keith was very solid and organized. And I remember him getting a little frustrated. But I mean, as far as specifics, you just try to do whatever you can, keep your head down. And I cared about people and I was hoping that everything was getting done in a timely fashion and that kind of thing. I'm sure there was something that was frustrating, but I wasn't really sure. My feel was like, hey, if I can help out, I'll help out. And a nice bonus, I was like, that's all I care. It's like having my name in the, not all I care, but I'm like, I don't need bonus pay or anything. I just want my name in the credits too, because like this is what I wanted to do. And it was just tough because I already had a full-time, I was still in design at that point. So I wasn't really involved in production. And yeah, so I wasn't really sure. I feel bad. I don't like that that was frustrating, but I'm sure I always saw Keith as a very professional person. So I believe it.
If it isn't any under like red tape or anything, what can you say about Jungle Jam?
I just remember they made an all call out to people to not only, like, hey, if you have any ideas for the studio that Phil he's got a vision. And if you have anything creative to do that. And I remember they had bought Jungle Jam and I think I did sketches for it, but I don't have a huge memory on that. I think it just kind of went into the ether, if you will. I'm sure if I piece through old work, I'll run into it, but I did have a lot of stuff stolen and destroyed. So that's probably why I don't remember. Oh my goodness. I haven't thought about that in a long time. But yeah, if I remember anything, I'll definitely email you.
Is there any other staff members that you'd like to give a shout out, like aside from like Mike Naraki, Ron Eddy, Bill Vischer, if you'd like to indulge some a bit about them as well?
Let's see. I don't know, just in general, I thought for the most part, everybody was really good at what they did. And especially in the technical development, there was a lot of people that had to sleep under their desks because they're working late hours. I'm trying to think of specifics.
I'll bring up some names. There's Chris Olsen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's always a great guy. I mean, I didn't really know personally what he was doing, but he was a great person to work with. And I think I worked with him on a couple of things. I remember he went off to work somewhere else. Yeah, he's a great guy. I don't remember what year he left, but yeah, he was a solid guy to work with.
What do you have to say to Brian Ballinger?
Oh, yeah, Brian. He was great. Pretty wacky, if you will. He's definitely got his own style. And yeah, he was fun to work with. Oh yeah, John Crouch. I remember distinctly about him, like his first week, he only had like a couple of questions and he pretty much hit the ground running. He was just a very, very capable person. So I remember if we were all working late, I would throw on some Earth, Wind, and Fire and they would laugh about it. But I think they enjoyed, I mean, like everyone's got to love Earth, Wind, and Fire. So yeah, they were fun to work with. I really was glad that John was there. John worked really well with Ron, and Todd, I believe, was still there. It was a really special group of people. And I think that he was one of the first people there when they really started expanding, when the company really started blowing up. So yeah, and I think he's still doing great. I think he's involved with Pixar. But yeah, John's a great guy.
What about Paul Conrad?
Oh yeah, Paul. I mean, wicked talented and a very nice guy. He was head of design after we had someone who should not have been hired, in my opinion. Paul definitely did very well. His sense of humor was definitely welcome. Sometimes we would have some extraneous meetings and he would kind of convey that without being too upfront about it. Just very funny. So, but yeah, like Paul's incredibly talented. I mean, just from being capable as a leader and being capable as an actual worker, I mean, it's a rare combination. So,
Yeah, and last but not least, Todd Mock. I know that you brought him up earlier, but Todd Mock.
oh yeah, Todd had a good sense of humor and it was perfect for the children's realm. So it was really good to brainstorm with him and Ron about things early on. And then yeah, he was there. I don't know if he was there after after 2001 is kind of like a blur, but yeah, Todd's very talented, worked on a lot of the initial kind of look, like the fun and funky VeggieTales kind of look. It was like him and Ron, because those are the first two guys that I started working with. Yeah, they're all very great people.
Is there any like a particular hilarious memory at Big Idea that you want to share out into the world?
Yeah, lunchtimes were really fun when we were in Chicago. A lot of the times people would just be working so much and we wouldn't get out. So sometimes we would watch Mystery Science Theater. There was like this weird little area and there was like a printer there eventually, but we had some tables out. That's why I really enjoyed being on the fourth floor with everybody. Or was it the sixth floor? I can't remember. Yeah, and then we would take breaks and play video games, especially on Lombard. That was always fun because if you're working late, and it was mostly production, but when I would be involved in production, I would join them in that. That's what we would do as friends because I had a little small group of friends in design for a short while. But yeah, we would hang out after work and on some weekends. It was just for a short while, but we would just get pizza and play video games, and that was rather fun. So, I mean, we kind of like knew each other. A lot of us were in Bible study together as like a different group. So we had like married people with kids and single people. So the whole like run the gamut. And there's really not too many companies that are like that.
Now, what did you do after Big Idea, after being laid off in 2001?
Gosh. Well, I did contract work for them and for other clients. And I know I moved around a bit, but yeah, mostly in Chicago, just trying to get different types of work. There were a bunch of people going to different animation studios, but I didn't really have the confidence to think that I didn't think I had a big enough reel for an animation studio at that point because I felt like I was a little bit more in different marketing and design avenues as opposed to having production experience. So yeah, I just continued with whatever I could get, like storyboard work, or I think from there, I'm trying to think directly, but yeah, I mostly was always involved I mean, I started out in advertising and I tried editorial for a little bit. I know I was doing some editorial while I was employed at Big Idea. So I had a few random clients and I would just do all not digital work, but I did tangible stuff for them. Yeah, probably like a lot of stuff. It's not really very attractive. You know, you just do a bunch of work and that nobody ever sees. It's basically just pitched to clients. So that's probably what it was.
In 2014, you worked on another one called Saturday Night Fever. Was that like contractual or?
Yeah, that was a contract because I moved back to the Tennessee area and had been talking to Ron and Linda Eddy. And I stayed with them. I rented a room from them. I was in a big house in Thompson Station, which is a beautiful area of Tennessee. So, and I think it was through Ron because I would come home from my day job. I worked at an apparel company and I would just get to work with I did a lot of work for other clients. And he was like, yeah, I think they might need some stuff for production. But it was really tough to get answers to questions because I think they were just kind of overloaded in a way. That's my best assessment. if it weren't for Ron seeing that I was actually trying and trying and trying to get more feedback, I would have felt like, is it me? But yeah, I really don't know what was used because I did buy a copy of the DVD, but I haven't really watched all the way through yet. But absolutely loved that idea. And I think I did like a drawing of them all in their 70s gear. And then I did a thing that Laura had drawn. It was like a poster that she draws. So you had to make it look like a kid. There were a couple other things, but I don't remember. It was like, I think Ron would give me actually try to prime the pump while he was at work. And it wasn't like we had a production studio anymore. They were doing that off site. So it was a little different than old school, big idea. He would try to help me out. But yeah, I mean, it was, I'm trying to work within the limitations. And I had wanted to know like what style they would want these in. So it was just different. And I didn't want to be frustrating, but I did want to get some direction on what they were expecting. So I was kind of like off in a void, if you will. So that's kind of how I remember it. But I was happy to be involved. But I think something happened after that. And then I had heard through the grapevine that Mike had recorded his last voiceover work for Larry at some point, and I let Ron know. And yeah, I think it was like, well, maybe the company might go through some changes. And Ron had been there from day one. And I think it spoke really well to the type of person he is. He's very, very dedicated and would put forth, more than 100% if it's possible. I just felt like, wow, if I would have known more of the culture of how it is now, I probably would have been more useful. But yeah, it was like I would ask a question and it would just kind of hang. So I'm sure somebody knows why. I'm like, maybe the guy didn't really care for me. I don't really know, but I wasn't trying to be controversial or difficult to work with. I just was wanting to know just a few questions, and I would just end up doing it and just send it and would never hear any response or feedback. So a lot different than what it used to be.
And on that note, my last question to you is that people want to know you better. What do you want to be known for?
Well, I hope people understood that I was doing whatever I could to help out whatever department needed it, help my coworkers out. Gosh, that's a tough question. Yeah, and usually I felt like I had a good understanding of what the character types were and their personalities. So whenever I would do a sketch for somebody, I would try to put in little jokes here and there. And I think I came up with a bunch of sketches, and I don't know if they ever saw the light of day, but I thought it would be funny to make peas with hair higher than what they actually were. Or how do you place an object in front of a character to cheat? Like, how do you make Larry look like he's playing baseball? And, how do you make it look like they're catching something, but not going off model? I was really hoping that people understood that it was like, okay, if I were a kid, what would I want to see? What would I think was cute and funny? And you never get any real answer whether or not the kids like it or not. I mean, it's just something that's going on inside them when they're watching it. But I knew that the ultimate audience was the kids. And if they weren't really jiving with it, then it's just going to fall flat. And it's going to be this, you forget it immediately after seeing it. And it's just the schlock. What's the point? And I know that that was the spirit of Phil and Mike anyway. I mean, they would always put in little clever jokes that adults could understand, the kids might understand later, but it's just really funny and absurd, and but not too terribly absurd. It's just absurd within the story. So I was hoping that they understood that I not only got that, but I was trying to keep that alive, if you will. So I, whatever idea session, and if I had to rein somebody back in, it was like, that's not really something that they would do. Not that I'm the police on that, but just trying to keep Phil and Mike's ideas as lively and funny as I possibly could. And who knows, maybe I didn't succeed, but I certainly did try. But I did whatever I would find funny. I was like, oh, this is hilarious. Like an Andy Williams Christmas special would be hilarious. Larry was trying to pull it off, and Bob's just kind of looking at him sideways. And I thought that would be the dynamic that they would have. Or Larry's just more like, let loose and have fun. And Bob's like, whoa, what's going on here? So it's you try to convey that in a picture. Yeah. And then trying to do line art, you have to be so polished with line art. But at least line art can be taken apart and used in different packaging when they're not going to do. It was before digital printing. So, we were right on the edge of that. So sometimes we did everything with a black outline and flat color and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess trying to be a team player and not be a prima donna. I was trying to dance that line, I guess.
Yeah. I thank you again for joining on this podcast and going down memory lane for you.
I appreciate your time. And yeah, it was good. It was a good walk down memory lane. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right.
I'll see you, Jody.
All right. You take care. Thanks.
I'd like to thank Jody Nilsen for letting us take a trip down memory lane. You can check out her work by visiting her website, jodydraws.com. Link is in the description. I'd also like to thank Reziel for all the additional research. And until next time, we'll see you on another What's the Big Idea podcast.
Hi, my name is Jody Nilsen, and you're listening to What's the Big Idea podcast.